Justin Bazan, my good friend, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Steve, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it.
Justin, anyone who follows you on social media will realize right away that you like to travel, usually with your lovely girlfriend. Um, and it also tells me that you must have done some things right in your business because you get to travel. You go all over the world. So before we jump into the topic, where are you going next? What's next on the world travel itinerary for Justin Bazan?
Thanks for asking. And yeah, you're right. I did a few things right, but I also got very lucky and I have an excellent team helping me out too. But we'll get more into that. This background actually reminds me of where I just came from. I was in Fiji for a couple of weeks and it looks a lot like this background. So I'm already kind of salty. I'm not still there on the beach. Next up, we're going to see some family in Virginia. Then I'm going to head down to Florida for New Year's. And then from there, I don't know where I'm going to go. Well, when things pop up, that's usually if I get a good deal through my Delta miles or something like that, we'll usually figure it out from there. But I do plan on probably taking the office trip, or at least a select group of office employees, for an all-inclusive down to Cancun as a little reward for a great year. And maybe we could even talk about how we're funding that too as we get into the discussion.
Yeah, Cancun, I just got back actually, so I hope you have a great time there. It's part of the adventure, right? You said wherever things take me. And man, you said something that just stuck out at me, and it's not really the intent of the podcast, but I got lucky and I have a great team. So I don't want to go too far down that road, but I did a podcast once where someone asked me at the end. It was actually Harbir Sion. A lot of people listen to his
Oh
podcast
yeah,
as well.
awesome. Yeah, you're a
Yeah,
great
and
dude.
he said, "How much of any success you've had would you allocate, or would you say it came from hard work versus luck?" And it really caused me to think. And I think we're all lucky to some degree, but you got to put yourself in a position. It's sort of the hard work that puts you in a position to have the opportunities, and then we can look
Hard
back
work
on them.
makes luck.
It makes luck. It really does. It's just an interesting take on that. And then the team aspect, we'll get into that a little bit, I think. But it's so important that you have the support system around you. But I digress. And moving on from your travel itinerary to maybe a less exciting but still very important topic, I want to dig into something with you today that I think every practice cares about, but few actually optimize, perhaps to the level that you have in your practice. And that's how to simplify your contact lens strategy and secure the best pricing. So I get asked, and we'll just come right out of the gate with the key question here, I think, because I hear this a lot. How do I get the best pricing on contacts? And from your experience, what actually moves the needle when it comes to pricing and rebates as well?
Well, you gotta take actually one step before the pricing thing. You got to identify what your philosophy for contacts is. When I founded Park Slope Eye back in 2008, I said that if a daily disposable is going to be an option for a patient, they're getting the experience that daily disposable. So we went right off the bat saying we need to do dailies. Then we said, well, what is going to give us top performance in a contact lens? And that evolves over time as the R&D cycle through manufacturers changes. But you need to identify the products that are going to be helpful to your patients. So, and then when things are clinically significant, you can start to whittle down, hey, what is going to be the best for the practice? What is going to pack the most profitable punch? Okay, so then you start saying, all right, well, how do I determine what's profitable? Well, I need to get the best price and I need to sell the most of these things. So I got to have the best price and it's got to be an easy sale for an annual supply. There were certain companies, because I was a cold start, that I wasn't getting any love from. And in the beginning, it took a very savvy rep from B&L to realize that I was doing zero business with them. And he came in and he just wanted to ask a couple brief questions. I said, I ain't got time for you. But I did say, why don't you just shoot me an email? We do a lot of email stuff. So he shoots me an email. He gets to know me a little bit better. He knows what buttons that motivate me to make decisions in the business. And he worked that angle of like, hey, I got a brand new daily disposable. Since you're doing really well with X product, I think you're going to do even better with this one. And look at the impact it's going to have on your finances, right? So it's not only going to be a better product for the patient, it's going to be a better profitability for the practice. And ultimately, it works even better for optometry. So it hits the three P's that I like to run decisions through. It's good for the practice, it's good for the patient, it's good for the profession. And it did. And that relationship started to develop. Now, that was old school. That's going back, heck, 17 years. So that layer of just identifying the best product and get me the best price, that may be one component of it, but the industry's evolved. There's much better ways now to make sure that you are being the most profitable and building your business in the most successful ways. And one of them is with some of these loyalty programs that we see. And I'm sure we'll talk about in the future the IDOC program, specifically Vantage, that we get.
You mentioned leaning into things like practice, you come to the three P's: practice,
For the patient, the practice, and the profession.
patient, practice, and profession. And it gives the why behind why you're doing it as well. Because you mentioned before the importance of having a team around you, but part of leadership is getting that team on board sometimes and getting them to see the bigger picture. I think sometimes we forget that, or practice owners like yourself, people in leadership positions, how to present things to staff to get their buy-in and not feel like you're forcing things on them. So have you found that having those sort of guidelines, if we want to call them philosophies within the practice, which is where you said you had to start from, did that help clarify things for the team and get them bought into the what vendors you use and what strategic directions you go with products you use as well?
I'm going to say something a little tongue in cheek, and I'll get into the nuances of it. If somebody's not on board, maybe they're find their happiness somewhere else, right? So that seems very harsh, but it does save a lot of headaches in the long run. One bad apple spoils the whole bunch, things like that. But in a day and age where it's very easy to find great help, which I kid about, you do want to make sure that you're giving people the opportunity to help understand where the practice is going and how we get there and buying into the vision, as you say. So one of the things that I do is I hire very, very freaking slow. And if I got to suck it up and be in the office working my ass and busting my ass more, I'll make sure that I'm picking up that slack until we get the right person or what we think is the right person in there. So when I was hiring my associate, I basically was looking for a business-minded individual, somebody who potentially would either in a few years buy into the practice or start their own business or buy another business. So I looked for somebody who had a ownership mentality already. My office manager has been with me for a decade plus, and he gets it because it's directly tied to how well he does. So we don't necessarily have a commission structure. We do have a bonus structure, and we do pay attention to overall numbers, which we can talk about KPIs. And then even down to like my techs in the office, they understand that they're part of a team as well. So we all work together and we all understand the goals that we want to achieve and the mission, how to get there. And we utilize the tools and resources with me kind of presenting them along the way.
Yeah, and I agree with you when you've got team that they're not on board. My philosophy has typically been to reduce friction. And owners
Ah,
like yourself, you're not in the office every day, and I hear it all the time. Things fall apart when I'm not there, when my manager's not there, and then you'll get staff I found usually won't directly tell you I'm not doing this, I'm not on board. Sometimes associates do. That's another issue that you have to deal with, but in general, I think when they understand the broader picture, how does this benefit the patient, the practice, the key stakeholders, including them, then they're more likely to buy in and you just get less friction along the way. You don't have to
I
do
can
all
share
that.
an example of this.
Yeah.
So an example would be, let's say you have an associate doc who is just whatever contact lens a patient comes in with, heck, it could be a freaking, hydrogel from the 90s. And they're just writing off on the same prescription. You're like, you're doing fine in those lenses, right? Boom, sign off on it. Well, that's not necessarily in the patient's best interest. It's not necessarily in the practice's best interest, and it's not necessarily in the profession's best interest. So that doesn't meet any of those decision-making funnels that we put that through. Now, what would I do? In the past, we first bring attention to the situation. So we just have a sit-down, honest discussion because we need to find out the motivating factors behind it. We need to understand the associate doctor's philosophies. So the associate doctor might say something like, you know what? I see a patient every 15 minutes. I ain't got time to have a conversation about a contact lens. I'm just trying to get through the day. That's the bad habit that I have is when I'm getting rushed through things, I take shortcuts. You know what? Light bulb over the business owner's head should go off and say, hey, if I really want to move the needle and get patients into healthier, more profitable product, we need to give them an extra 5 to 10 minutes. So instead of maybe a 15-minute exam spot, let me ease up the stress of the day for you and let's try 25-minute exam slots or 30 minutes or maybe if you only want to go up 5 minutes and do 20 minutes. You need to first have a conversation, identify what you just said is where's that friction coming from, and then add some I guess lube in this case
Hmm.
to ease that up. Another example would be, let's say that there's clinically equivalent hydrogel, silicone hydrogel lenses. You can help the associate doc say, hey, from a clinical standpoint, you're getting similar performance in these products. However, one is much more beneficial to making this business continue on being successful. And here's how it breaks down. I keep a Google document of all of our contact lenses, our preferred brands, our secondary brands, and I list profitability next to them. And sometimes on an annual supply, it's a $200 difference in profit. You multiply that out over a few patients a day, and you're looking and being like, man, you were talking about a raise, and I'm talking about I'm leaving five, $400, $600 on the table every day. Let's see if we can work these numbers and make it better for everybody involved in this. So having those discussions, pointing out data, finding creative solutions, it's all part of being a great business owner and working with those associate docs who may have develop those bad habits, but there's always a reason.
And it's part of the why as well. I think that people that are not in an ownership capacity, don't have an ownership stake, have to realize, and sometimes it has to be communicated to them that being mindful of the business improves things for everybody, including them. It's your ability to invest back into the technology, the office, the patient care, and the staff as well.
And look,
Um,
nobody's getting a 5-star review with a specific mention of your name from a freaking AccuView 2. However, an infused multifocal that changes that patient's life, you better believe you're getting that 5-star with a specific mention of your name in there. And we point that out. We highlight that. Our business lives and dies by the review. And whenever we get that review, like, Dr. Lynn got one yesterday and it said, Dr. Lynn is the greatest or something like that. We highlight it and I took a screenshot, sent the email, I said, the great Dr. Lin. And we all get a good laugh at it, but we understand you're making that level of impact. And not only it affects that patient, but it affects everybody who's evaluating our practice as a potential future choice. And it helps making sure that we stand out above the competition in a very saturated area. There's 17 practices within 20 blocks of me. And if we want to continue to be the best, we have to be the best in the office and outside of the office on these review platforms.
Justin, you talked about a conversation you had with the BNL rep, and just that conversation alone sort of changed the strategic direction that you were going in, changed your mindset a little bit. Can you talk about your experience with reps? I actually just put a post on LinkedIn today, and I quoted Dr. Brianna Rue, who we just did a podcast with, talking about how reps grow your business. They're the people that grow your business because they understand the business. They know what's going on in your local community. They've been to other practices in your area and they want to help you because helping you helps them as well. There is a win-win capacity there. How have you utilized reps in a way that helps grow the practice where I think a lot of ODs see reps as an interruption to their day?
Shout out to all the great reps who are listening in on this, if they are. One of the things you may want to share is that, we're getting our quarterly rebate checks from awesome programs like the Vantage. And if you walked into an office and you have a good relationship with somebody and you feel comfortable doing this, you can be like, um, hey, I heard Bazan's taking his office to Cancun end of this year and he's using his rebate check to do that. Imagine if you got a rebate check that big. What would you actually do with a rebate check like that? Would you take the office or would you buy a new side by side or what would you do with your check? And you can have a conversation, be like, what? Bazan's got that? He got that big of a check? How do you do that? If the reps can work with a lot of different tools and ways to approach the situation. I mentioned before, an email was the way to see me. Another one might be pointing out another doctor's success that rep thinks that they can also achieve in this office. Um, there are a lot of docs, and I know this to be true, that have very busy schedules and not enough interest to meet with a rep and a pop-in. A pop-in can be great to get the foot in the door, leave information for the staff, update them on rebates, and then set up an appropriate time with the doc. even if it's just in between the patient saying, "Hey doc, I'm here to support you. I'm going to shoot you an email. I'd love to talk about this, this, and this because I think it's going to benefit you in this, this, and this way." And maybe you want to email, maybe you want to text them, maybe you want to just come by the office with lunch and drop it off. There's lots of different avenues to explore how to build a relationship. But I could tell you as a doctor, whether I'm on the associate side of things or whether I'm on the ownership side of things, there's never been a conversation with a rep that I didn't gain some information that I could personally use in a way that would help make me more successful. If reps aren't providing that value, then that may be an issue that you could bring up to them, being like, "Hey, you always come in here and all you do is really just, come in and give me an update on my numbers, but we don't ever have ways to help actually improve those numbers. Do you have some creative ideas?" And then I'm sure that if that rep does, they will share them with you. And if they don't, I'm sure that they're going to find out from their other reps because they're all in little teams or even their managers to sit down and strategize to help you build your business. Ultimately, the reps get paid if you make more, if you do more business with them. And if you're doing more business with them, you're going to be more successful and more profitable in your own right.
I think it's important to be intentional with the reps, and you made some great points there. And I understand the sometimes the reaction to a rep coming in unannounced. I got to about a year ago, I got to drive around with a rep out in the field, and it was really interesting because she was incredibly knowledgeable, and I got to see that up front. And we'd walk into some offices, and I saw the interaction between her and the staff and everything she shared. And I mean, they soaked it all in, and I learned a lot just listening to her. She was a lab rep, but I also was witness to walking into some offices where you could literally see people look away when the rep walked in. And the doctors were just diving into storage rooms. We walked out of one
Yeah.
office literally, and she said, "Do you see the guy who jumped into that room when I walked in?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "That's the doctor. He'll never talk to
Yeah.
me." So I think being intentional with the reps, define the terms. I mean, if you don't like the pop and tell them, "Look, I want to talk to you, but can you come in at these times? And here's what I would like from you. Here's the numbers, here's the data, here's the strategies," because you might have to give them that direction. Otherwise, I found from my own experience, sometimes they just come in and they sort of, they drone on about some new formula FDA formulation or something that's really
Yeah.
not adding a lot of value for you or your team.
Yeah, no, that's 100% correct. And I've also been on ride-alongs too. And I do know that there are a difference of a warm reception and a cold reception to a no reception where you're literally just hiding out. And I think you just hit the nail on the head expressing what your needs and desires and wants are. And the reps, because they're people pleasers by the nature of their job, are going to meet them. So you explained that perfectly, and I agree 100%. The reps are actually just, one rep that pops in as one component to an overall team of reps that you have. You have your IDOC reps, your PDMs, your practice director managers, like Mimi was one of the first people to informed me about the new program that she felt was going to be so beneficial for me. You have the company's reps. We talked about, the contact lens reps. You also have your distributor reps. My distributor, contact lens distributor rep, and my contact lens reps often work together too to ultimately help make me the most profit. The distributor deals that we can get by buying a bank in combination with the best pricing that we get from IDOC, teamed up with the best loyalty programs that we get from IDOC, and I'm winning. I'm up big time. So I think that although the landscape has changed and it's much harder to get an easy profit from a contact lens patient, I think it's easier to get a larger profit from a contact lens patient now, all things considered. If that makes sense. So it's
It
harder to
makes,
do, but more rewarding if you do it.
yeah. Can you go into your experience with Vantage? You've mentioned that a couple times. People might be wondering what that is. Uh, Full transparency, it's an IDOC program, but can you explain what that is and how it's benefited you individually? And maybe this is a two-part question because I also want you to expand on something you said when we talked before in preparation for this call about the value of going deeper with fewer companies to have higher negotiating leverage.
Yep. That's where we're at. So I think initially when I said in the beginning is it's not just about saving a few bucks on all your contacts. It's about making sure that you're earning the most and largest profit on the ones you sell the most and the easiest time selling. So IDOC has negotiated with basically all four vendors, but depending on which vendors you are going to strategically align with, you're going to work with, like in my case, it's B&L would be my top one through the Vantage program. The Vantage program came around this summer and it rewards me for my loyalty to that company. And then it builds upon that with other rewards in the form of lower pricing and rebates back. So let's say my entry level, like many people here, would be between 30 and 40% of market share for that company, for B&L. I get placed in a tier where I'm being rewarded much more than the average rebates used to be. Which average rebates used to be anywhere from what, 6, 9%, even if you had a large chunk of your business going to a company. Now we're seeing if you're doing at least 30%, you're getting 12% back on your total spend for that manufacturer. In my case, I'm at the tier level where I'm getting 18% back. And if I do a little bit better, I'll be rewarded with 25%, which is insane. So you talk about, yeah, you can save a few bucks per box, but where the real benefit is rewarding you for being loyal to that company and using them as your first choice. Now, we all have a first choice, which is going to be awesome. And then if that doesn't work out, we know we have a second option. And that's where you can see the benefit from having two vendors. Now, we all have the one-offs where there's a particular lens from a company that only works as the only option. Great. So you'll have a few percentage points for 3 and 4. But if you're relying on the primary lens from your number one company with the best programs and the best pricing, you're going to see the best profits. And then, like I said, if that product doesn't work, boom, you have your fallback, your number two. So it's very easy to do nowadays. You don't have to take a shotgun approach. You take a very strategic and mindful approach on how you're fitting and contact lenses, and you'll be rewarded financially, and the practice will continue to build success.
Yeah, I appreciate that summary of everything. And if anyone, I'll just mention, has any questions about that or is interested to learn more, you can reach out to me. We tried to set this up as that balance between having choice because we don't want, even as an alliance, we don't want to force people into making a decision, but at the same time recognizing the business value of, as we're discussing, going deeper with fewer companies. And we tried to combine that. So, like you said, you've got that backup but going deeper, how do you
You're
choose
not going to do any worse. You're only going to do better. And I think that if I was a rep bringing this, out and getting the information out there, that's exactly what I say. Look, you're already doing a certain level of business with certain vendors. You can do better if you want to, and here's how you can do better. And I think that by saying that you're being rewarded for what you're already doing, and then we're going to incentivize you to reach maybe a little slightly higher plateau to win. It's definitely a win. I think IDOC for putting and working with, the companies to put together such strong programs. The Vantage program is by far the strongest program I've ever seen in the last 22 years of doing this.
Yeah. And it allows you to go deeper with the relationships as well, which is so key. I mean, business is all about relationships. So
Yep.
being able to have that higher touch point, higher value relationship with fewer reps, I think both sides benefit.
We have a saying in my office, and I take a lot of flack for this, but we do special favors for special people. And we do. It's easy to say, oh, we don't play favorites, treat everybody the same. But that's not true. You got a patient that comes and spends $5,000 a year in your office. If they need something, you're going to help them out with a little bit more than if you look at somebody who's never bought a product in your office. So I think that goes the same when we have relationships with reps. They do see that you're giving them the attention and they're giving you back that attention too.
I want that as a customer, don't you?
Hmm.
If I spent
Yeah.
thousands of dollars with somebody, I would like that loyalty in return. I think we're afraid to admit it, but we all want special favors from businesses that we spend a lot of money with. Let's admit it. The flip side works too, because I've seen offices want to impose a policy on somebody, maybe for a no-show or they showed up late or something. And I'm like, really? You're not going to flex that policy on that person who comes back every year with their family and spends a boatload
Hmm.
of money at your practice?
That's a great example. We just, you just brought up that point. We have $100 no-show. So I was actually, Aaron, who was my office manager, was away until today, actually. And I was remotely managing the inbox and also the schedule. And I noticed that this patient no-showed, fired off an email. We missed you today. Hope everything's okay. As part of, we always explain, $100 fee if anything's missed. Invoice attached, click here to pay. He pays it and then says, "Oh crap, I didn't get anything. I think it's because I changed my phone number. I didn't get any notifications, and then my spam filter is probably pretty high." I said, "You know what?" I looked at his history. This was his second year. I said, um, "No big deal. Things happen. I'm gonna give you a $50 credit, so when you show up, you'll have your $50 credit on there. But I appreciate you, and also for giving me the updated phone number. I fixed it up right away. Happy holidays. We'll see you next week." And I think that even though he wasn't somebody who was an established patient, but seeing that level of patient who, one, paid the fee like on the spot, was apologetic, and then we can reciprocate that, goodwill to him back. I think that's where you see really a relationship develop.
Justin, you referenced a lot of numbers before, and I think it's something that maybe not enough owners have enough transparency and awareness as they should about the numbers in their own practice. What numbers do you well, maybe that's too broad of a question, but talk to me a little bit about maybe do you have a weekly routine where you sit down and go over XYZ numbers? Do you have certain dashboards you look at, certain numbers that you'll communicate to the staff? I mean, there's 10,000 metrics we could track, right?
Yeah.
But what is your process for tracking these things? Because it's so important to understand the business and make strategic decisions like we're talking about today, even around contacts. Well, you're making them by gut if you don't know your numbers, right?
That is true. The ultimate number that I look at is, I guess, the bank account. When those numbers, the checking gets a little bit low, I'm like, oh crap, what did we mess up cash flow wise this year, or is there a red flag that we need to investigate? But recently, I've been very good at starting routines, and I use a Google Calendar. I actually create a recurring event. So the first and the 15th are when I feel motivated to do stuff and check stuff. So, for example, on the 15th of every month, I'm going to be logging into my Edge Pro, which part of the Vantage program benefit is you get to have your numbers, your data pulled from your EHR, which in my case, it's Revolution EHR, and presented in dashboards that allow me quick access to see some important numbers. So on the 15th, I'm going to go through and I'll look at some of the numbers that matter most. But I got a feeling this 15th, because I'm curious to understand how all of the numbers at the end of the year are. I'll actually sit down, and I'm a maniac about it, but I'll go through each of the drop downs and click every freaking single dashboard on there. And I'll say, what is this information showing me? What am I learning? And what can I do to make the practice better in any way from this information? And, it looks daunting at first because there's going to be 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, probably 35 different dashboards that'll come up, but you don't need all of them. However, for the first few times you're doing it, go through them all to understand what data you have access to. And you may have an idea pop up in your head. Oh, crap, that doesn't look right. Let me investigate. Oh, crap, that's awesome. The team's doing great. Let me say something and reward them for that. Or maybe this number's a little off compared to last year. But you don't know unless you look, right? We don't know what we don't know. So I think that just by having a specific calendar event that recurs that tells me go to that dashboard and look at stuff, sometimes I go down that rabbit hole, and next thing you know, I'm digging into data for 2, 3 hours at a time. I also want to give a special shout out to not only IDOC for having a program that incorporates this Edge Pro data dashboard, but also the person that trained me was Patty. Shout out to Patty. I don't know if she's an IDOC employee or an Edge employee or if it's the same thing, but she was wonderful and she walked me through all of the different data sets and actually helped me identify some issues or potential issues in my own invoicing and why the data wasn't getting into the system. We were ad hocing things instead of having frames and inventory, we were having write-offs and creating discounts. And I think she helped point out some things that could have turned into some bigger issues if we didn't catch them early enough. So shout out to Patty for helping me work through that.
Yeah, Edge Pro has been great even on our side, on the consulting side, because you see the things that highlight or point at the real problems. And working with other doctors, sometimes they'll call saying, "Oh, I'm having this problem over here," and then I'm looking at the data, going, "Have you looked at this number?" And it's a revelation to them, like, "Oh, maybe the problem is over here." And I think having an understanding of that gives you that clarity. Doctors can spend a lot of time, and business owners. I'm not picking on doctors, just business owners in general. If you're operating on gut and
Yep.
feelings, well, sometimes your feelings are wrong, and sometimes you think
Yep.
problem is over here when actually the problem is over here, and the numbers don't really have feelings, so they tell a more accurate story. So yeah, we use Edge Pro. There's other systems out there as well, but I'm glad you're happy with it because even from a consulting aspect, it's helped me a ton from a consulting standpoint in being able to communicate to other doctors and guide them in where the real issues are in the practice and what we need to work on.
Yep, it gives you opportunities. Two things that I really like about it. One is it gives me also the competitive drive. So if it tells me I'm in the 90th percentile, great. But if it tells me I'm in the fifth percentile, I'm like, oh shit,
Yeah.
we need to improve in that. And numbers that are tracked tend to go up. So I like the competitive dashboards that I see on there, and it gives me some goals. And I just need to, if I have a goal, I just need to figure out the steps, reverse engineer the steps on how to get to that goal. And that's some of the things that we work on with the team. As far as sharing numbers with the team, I mean, we use Rev. So if and I think I have it unrestricted, if they wanted to see what they did for the day, if they wanted to see what they did for the month, they wanted to see what we did for the year, for the last 5 years, 10 years since we've been open, those numbers are there. I'm pretty much an open book. The reason I'm an open book is because those numbers are affected by the people that are working there. And I'm honest and open about that. I know that's not a strategy for everybody, but it works well for our office and for our team. And we have a very small but mighty team.
Well, Justin, this has been great. I want to thank you for your time, your insights. Probably we should have done this a lot sooner, but thanks B&L for bringing this together and all their support as well for being a great vendor partner with IDOC. And is there anything else in closing out you want to add?
No, I appreciate you having a platform like this. So if anybody's out there listening and they want more information, I'm very easy to get a hold of, and I'd be more than happy to help and continue tuning in to a great podcast.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Enjoy your travels. We look forward to seeing where you're off to next. And thanks to Justin. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.
Appreciate you, Steve. Take care. Thank you.